As the European elections approach, the European Union stands at a crucial juncture for the next 5 years. Will the EU move closer to full integration, possibly embracing a consolidated fiscal policy, harmonized immigration policy, and even a unified European army? Alternatively, might the focus pivot towards bolstered nation-states, maintaining the EU as a free trade zone while scaling back integration in other domains? In this video, we'll explore these inquiries and examine 6 potential scenarios for the future of the EU, the alignment of European parties with each scenario, the probable course of events. To analyze the potential evolution of the EU, we aim to explore 6 possible directions the Union could take in the future. This approach is inspired by the inquiry posed by the previous Commission President in 2017. The first scenario is straightforward. The EU continues along its current trajectory, making incremental improvements to existing policies and institutions. This approach prioritizes stability and continuity over drastic reform. To illustrate this concept further, let's delve into the EU's competency areas. Firstly, there are the EU's exclusive competencies, where the EU alone has the authority to pass laws, with member countries limited to implementing these laws unless otherwise authorized by the EU. This encompasses areas such as the customs union, competition rules, monetary policy, trade, and marine plants and animals. Next, we have the shared competencies, where both the EU and member states can pass laws, but member states can only do so if the EU has not already proposed laws. This includes areas like transport, migration, and energy. There are the supporting competencies, where the EU can only support, coordinate, or complement the actions of member countries without the power to pass laws or interfere with member countries' legislative abilities. Finally, there are the special competencies, granting the EU unique roles or actions beyond standard treaty permissions. This encompasses economic and employment policy, as well as the common foreign and security policy. Now, in terms of the first scenario, carrying on, not much would change. The competencies would predominantly remain distributed among these 4 categories. The EU could pivot its focus towards immediate challenges, such as immigration and global warming, without undergoing major reform. To simplify understanding, as we strive to do at EU Made Simple, let's illustrate this on a graph. However, over the years, the EU has been gradually integrating in areas like climate change, immigration, and foreign policy, particularly evident in its unified stance on Russia. Furthermore, the EU doesn't operate uniformly in all domains. There's already a differentiated approach with aspects like the Eurozone and Schengen. In summary, Scenario 1 offers stability and predictability. However, it might impede the EU's responsiveness to geopolitical crises and weaken its unified stance against global powers like China and the US. With that said, let's transition to the second scenario, which is nothing but the single market. In this scenario, the EU would experience disintegration in some areas while pursuing uniformity in others, positioning it in the bottom right quadrant of our graph. Here, the EU would return to its foundational principles, placing primary emphasis on deepening and perfecting the single market. Essentially, the guiding philosophy of this approach is to prioritize economic interests while minimizing political entanglements. In this scenario, political integration and broader cooperation in areas such as defense, energy, and the environment might take a back seat, while economic cooperation becomes the central focus. Therefore, we might see most shared competencies move back to the member states. The main benefit of this approach is that it might enhance the EU's economic competitiveness, as the EU still has some way to match powerhouses like the United States and China. Additionally, it could simplify Brussels' administrative processes. However, this narrowed focus might neglect crucial geopolitical matters, like Russia's invasion into Ukraine, possibly leaving the EU disjointed and vulnerable against external challenges. This brings us to the third scenario. Those who want more, do more. This scenario would mean differentiated integration, sitting in the top left quadrant of our graph. In this scenario, the EU adopts a flexible approach where member states can opt for deeper integration or cooperation in specific areas if they choose. while others may opt to abstain or participate less intensively. This effectively creates a multi-speed Europe. For instance, if we examine the EU's competency map, a core group of countries may advance in areas like defense or financial policies, while others maintain a looser association. An example of this is evident in monetary policy, where only 20 out of the 27 member states are part of the Eurozone and utilize the euro currency. This approach offers benefits and drawbacks. On one hand, the flexibility respects the unique aspirations of member states, facilitating quicker decision-making within aligned groups. However, it could lead to perceived divisions in the EU and challenge its overall unity, with complexities arising from managing multiple groups. Next, there's the fourth scenario, characterized by doing less, but more efficiently. In this scenario, the EU would concentrate its efforts on a narrower range of priorities, guaranteeing more efficient delivery on its commitments. Other areas could be left to the discretion of individual member states or be deprioritized on the EU agenda. The principle here emphasizes prioritizing depth over breadth. The EU could scale back its involvement in agriculture, fisheries, and environment, where the EU's approach has faced criticism for being overly complex, bureaucratic, and costly. Regarding benefits and drawbacks, Scenario 4 enables the EU to function with increased efficiency and expertise in selected domains, potentially diminishing bureaucracy and facilitating quicker decision-making. However, just like Scenario 2, this narrowed focus might neglect crucial geopolitical matters like Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Then there is Scenario 5 doing much more together. This scenario sits in the top right quadrant of our graph, indicating uniform EU integration. It portrays a centralized Europe with aligned values and collective decision-making, leading to more authoritative EU institutions as national powers shift to the European level. This also implies a significant transfer of responsibilities to the EU level, especially in domains such as foreign and fiscal policy. For instance, the creation of a fiscal union which centralizes EU fund collection and allocation, or the establishment of a unified European defense force. In terms of advantages and disadvantages, Scenario 5 strengthens the EU's global influence by presenting a unified stance and harmonizing policies. However, this heightened integration might be viewed as encroaching on national sovereignty and possibly disregarding the unique requirements of individual member states. Lastly, there is Scenario 6, back to the nation-states. Differentiated disintegration, which would pretty much mean the end of the EU. This would mean that all the competencies would be removed from the EU and given back to the nation-states. So now that we've explored the 6 scenarios, the question becomes, which scenario will the EU most likely head towards, especially after the European Parliament elections in June 2024? To analyze where the EU might be in 2029, we need to understand who will be in power in the European Parliament over the next 5 years. As a reminder, the European Parliament consists of 7 major political groups that consist of coalitions of like-minded parties from the 27 member states. Currently, the EPP, S&D, and Renew have the most seats in the European Parliament and therefore can shape a lot of the EU legislation. Nevertheless, amidst the recent surge of right-wing populism across the EU, Politico's polls indicate that the ECR and I&D are positioned to gain the most new seats in next year's elections. These two groups share a Eurosceptic inclination, but diverge in their vision and ideological stances. The right-wing ECR prioritizes EU reform that preserves national sovereignty and expresses skepticism toward further political integration. However, they do advocate for an EU that efficiently manages select areas of shared benefit, therefore loosely aligning to Scenario 4, doing less more efficiently. Meanwhile, I&D, situated further to the right with strong nationalist and populist roots, envisions the EU primarily as an economic entity. Their viewpoint resonates most with Scenario 2, nothing but the single market, preferring an EU that focuses solely on the single market with very limited political integration. For the other EU parties, it becomes even more challenging to neatly align them with specific scenarios, as they often have nuanced stances in different policy areas that can change drastically over time. Therefore, the associations below are broad generalizations, so consider them as rough guides rather than strict classifications. The EPP is a center-right party that supports a strong and unified EU. They advocate for more qualified majority voting, a stronger EU parliament, and a stronger EU defense policy. However, with the rise of right-wing factions within its ranks, some within the EPP have become more hesitant or even resistant to deeper EU integration. Thus, they currently align closest with Scenario 1, carrying on. The SNMD is a center-left party advocating for a more social and just EU. Their priorities are social justice and cohesion, environment and climate action, rule of law and democracy. Historically, the SND has been more favorable to further European integration compared to the EPP. They traditionally push for deeper political ties among EU states, especially in social and workers' rights areas. Therefore, the SNMD also aligns with Scenario 1, but with slightly more European integration. While both the EPP and SNMD have members who support the concept of a multi-speed Europe, the EPP's diverse membership might render it more receptive to differentiated integration as a means of advancing the EU. On the other hand, there's Renew, a centrist liberal group known for advocating deeper European integration. With Macron's Renaissance Party playing a pivotal role, they loosely align with Scenario 3. Those who want more do more. This is because Macron is a strong supporter of a multi-speed EU, and his efforts in establishing a European political community might be the first step towards a multi-tiered EU. Then the Greens EFA, representing environmentalist and minority rights agendas. They are likely to align closest with Scenario 5, doing much more together, focusing on collective action to address global challenges, especially environmental ones. The left-wing group prioritizes social justice and anti-austerity. Although they may not align perfectly with any single scenario, their inclinations could lean towards Scenario 5, dubbed Doing Much More Together, albeit with a specific emphasis on fostering equitable and social policies across the EU, most probable. Even though the ECR and INMD might gain a number of seats, the EPP is still likely to win more seats than both the ECR and INMD combined. And with the SNMD likely to win the second most seats, Scenario 1 looks like the most realistic option for now. Thus, maybe we will see some further European integration over the coming years. Most notably, the creation of a more united European defense policy, something the EPP has advocated for years. If the EPP wins the most seats in the European Parliament, they will most likely also get to choose the Commission President. This will empower them to enact their agenda. Above all, discover which party in your country aligns with which EU political group, enabling you to vote in line with your interests in the upcoming June elections. Don't forget to share your preferred scenario in the comments. Thank you for watching, and please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a thumbs up. Until next time!